And for more on the diplomatic process underway, I spoke a brief time ago with Frederic, who formerly served as the US State Department's point man on the Syrian transition. He's now a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Rafik Hariri Center for the Middle East. Ambassador Hoff, how much faith do you have in this diplomatic process leading to the Syrians giving up their chemical weapons?
I think it's difficult to have a great deal of faith in the process. I think the central mission of Secretary of State John Kerry right now is to try to determine if there is anything really to this proposal, if it holds water. He has a large body of experts with him, so obviously there are both technical and political questions to answer about this. But this is not a matter of faith. This is a matter, I think, of fact-finding.
Now, the president has said that whatever the Syrian government does with its chemical weapons has to be verifiable and enforceable. But
yes.
What are the practical difficulties with that in the middle of a civil war?
Yeah, there are lots of practical difficulties. Even if the conditions were ideal, even if there were peace and quiet on the ground, this would still be a very long and complex process. But you do have fighting. I presume some of the fighting is in the proximity of areas where these weapons and their components are stored. And beyond that, you have the very practical problem of whether or not the Assad regime, which until 2 days ago was denying that it even owned chemical weapons, is really going to cooperate with this process in good faith.
But isn't the worry, as the Turkish Prime Minister put it, that the Assad regime is just going to use this whole process to hide behind and continue the massacre?
Well, this is the essence of the problem, because if you look at the situation in Syria, the chemicals are the tip, the very tip of a very dangerous and deadly iceberg. The iceberg is an ongoing regime program of mass terror directed against populated areas it doesn't control. 99% of the damage, we're talking about 100,000 people dead, 7 million people driven from their homes, 2 million across international boundaries, 99%, conservatively speaking, has been accomplished with conventional weapons. This chemical issue is important. I wouldn't discount it, but it is the tip of a very ugly iceberg.
And yet the focus is on it, and likely on Monday at the United Nations, the UN inspectors will finally have their report on chemical weapons delivered. The UN Secretary General is suggesting that this will show that chemical weapons have been used. How's that going to change the whole dynamic?
I don't think it really does change the dynamic. I don't think that there are too many deniers out there anymore who are saying that chemical weapons were not used. The denials of some importance are those being voiced by Russian President Vladimir Putin and others, claiming that Syrian rebels were responsible for this. Quite frankly, I think Mr. Putin knows the truth of the matter.
Now, the diplomatic process is also reviving once more the diplomatic process between the US and Russia. This idea of a peace conference, just briefly, is that going anywhere?
Well, John Kerry said today that he and his Russian counterpart, Mr. Lavrov, will meet on or about the 28th of this month to discuss a possible date for a Geneva peace conference. But as Kerry points out, this depends on progress on the chemical front. Even though if there is progress on the chemical front, you still have the basic iceberg problem. If the program of mass terror continues, and it looks as though it is resuming after a brief hiatus since the 21st of August when the chemical attack took place, if that continues, the prospect of a Geneva peace conference is zero. Absolutely zero, because you cannot get the opposition to show up and negotiate while these outrages continue. Their credibility would not last 30 seconds with people inside Syria under these circumstances. So the Russians have a lot of work to do with their client beyond chemicals.
Ambassador Hoff, thank you for joining us.
My great pleasure. Thank you.